Welcome to the Startup Club podcast, where we share the journeys of innovation, failure, resilience, and triumph of some of South Africa's most exciting tech startup founders and investors. I'm Matthew Marsden, founder of Startup Club, and on the show today, Thomas Brennan and Sebastian Patel, co-founders of Franc, the simple and easy-to-use mobile app that's letting South Africans invest in leading cash and equity funds in just a few minutes, with no minimums, no paperwork, and no fine print. Founded in 2018, Franc has grown to over 120,000 users, has an average rating of 4.3 stars across the app stores, and has received accolades from the likes of Seedstars, Visa, and the MTN App of the Year Awards. Plus, they're graduates of Google for Startups and the Grindstone Accelerator. In 2022, and on the back of 400% year-on-year customer growth, Franc launched its B2B offering, Franc Business, also fueled by an 8 million rand seed round led by Pan-African VC 4DX Ventures. On a mission to make investing more affordable, accessible, and social, the journey is but getting started for the Franc team. Now, before we get into today's discussion, Startup Club ZA is built on impactful partnerships, and today's episode is brought to you by our friends at First National Bank, South Africa. As one of the country's most recognized brands, FNB needs little introduction. They're one of the pioneers of digital banking in our country, and they provide personal, private, business, and corporate banking services to millions of customers across South Africa. Now, although synonymous with innovation themselves, FNB is equally committed to supporting startups and the tech ecosystem more broadly in driving innovation and growing the economy. We had an opportunity to sit down with FNB's National Head of Sales in the commercial lending segment, Sandile Philip, to discuss more about the bank's work in this space. And you can hear that conversation at the halfway mark of today's episode, or visit fnb.co.za to learn more. For now though, let's get back to the episode.
You can't just go out with an idea. So I was working evenings getting a prototype ready, building, learning how to build apps, building apps, actually left Discovery, and then like a month later, the app was in the App Store. So I was confident enough that I'd actually had something that, people wanted and people needed. And that was enough of a market traction to be able to say, okay, take the risk.
Sure.
Now's the time. There is a support network. So I think people need to be, either have no liabilities or very low liabilities, or have a way of supporting yourself where you know that actually you can take that risk.
In the rapidly evolving world of personal finance, making investing more affordable and accessible is a mission that resonates globally. With the rise of innovative apps, investing platforms, digital-first banks, and robo-advisors, the ways that individuals are managing their investments are undergoing a significant transformation. Now, while these investments are often seen in developed markets, in developing markets, we're often fighting legacy infrastructure and poor consumer savings culture. And it's really only in the last 15 years that we've seen tech play a key role in helping the everyday consumer to actually participate in the financial markets. South Africa is quite unique in that it's always had a robust financial services sector with a plethora of investment and savings options available to retail investors. Think stocks, mutual funds, and retirement annuities. Yet, our savings and investment culture remains relatively poor, largely because of high fees, administrative barriers to entry, and poor investment education. It was out of frustration with these things and fueled by a concern at the poor rate of investment that friends Thomas Brennan and Seb Patel decided to start Franc in 2018 to allow users to invest as much as they want, when they want. Now, 7 years later, after a rollercoaster journey and many lessons learned, the team is as evident as ever to disrupt investment culture for everyday South Africans.
So interesting household in the sense that my mother was a maths teacher, but actually in her early life was a nun for 10 years. And I think her passion came from wanting to do something meaningful, in the height of apartheid, and, religious institutions were a few of the only institutions actually teaching in areas that needed, people to be taught. So, but after 10 years, she realized that actually her conviction wasn't as deep as she thought. She still remained a teacher and a maths teacher, but she left the convent and then, managed to meet my dad. And my dad was a pilot.
Okay.
And my mother at the time heard that the UCT Flying Club actually was a place where adults could get to know each other. Because this time she was a single lady in her early 30s, right? Yes. Which is not easy. And my dad was her instructor. They met, obviously things happened. So I think there's a passion element there, and there's sort of a conviction element. So my dad was a passionate pilot. That's just what he loved, despite doing engineering and being a very bright guy. And my mom just, always do the right thing. I have an older sister who is an anaesthetist in Cape Town. And I don't know if anybody has any older sisters, or maybe if you're listening on the call, you can probably feel me. Like, she was tough, man. She was a tough older sister. And they say that people learn your morals, your ethics, actually, when you're a kid. And that comes from that sibling relationship, I have no doubt. I learned about right and wrong in a very real way. And largely because I was abused. I was the victim of, we'd give out sweets and she'd be like, she'd start, one for me, one for you. And then she'd finish. She'd say, no, because I started, I need to finish with myself. And I'd be like, that's wrong. That's so wrong. But so I think on the back of that, I think I came out with that, I suppose, sense of doing the right thing. And then I think the one other thing, just to touch on, which I think I realized now is very an important, I went to a Montessori schooling system, which is a very free-based system. You self-guided in some ways. You have different stations around the classroom, and you got to go sort yourself out. I'd always go to the maths first. I love doing that. I loved understanding things, fixing things. So it was kind of easy for me to go into I choose to do what I like, and that is solving problems. Engineering was a very natural choice for me. And then I just quickly learned that I like solving social problems. There's a level of complexity there, which I find fascinating. It's not just designing a telecommunication system or a circuit board, which is great, but it's very dry. I find it very dry. Whereas the moment you add that human layer, that psychology layer onto a problem, it's it expounds in its complexity and fascination for me.
Sure.
Yeah. And then we can touch on it, I think, a little bit of risk. I've always think I'm quite a risky guy.
No, we'll get into that in a couple of moments, I'm sure. I don't know what you mean, risk. This is the startup space. What do you mean? Seb, what about you? Tell us a little bit about upbringing, anything formative like Tom's shared now that you can kind of recall and go, hey, that's actually been pretty definitive for me.
Well, Tom neglected to mention that he went to Bishops as well. Okay. Normally they say how do you know if someone went to Bishops? They tell you, but he's quite an anti-Bishops boy, because he kind of keeps that hidden.
Keeps it quiet.
For me, so I grew up in Durban.
Yep.
I was in the same school for 12 years. Great. It was a boys' Catholic school. I enjoyed school. I was pretty good at maths. So I went into actuarial science at UCT. That's how we met Tom. I'm sure we'll chat a bit more about that. In terms of family, my dad was a businessman. He ran a family business that was started by his grandfather. Mother academic, so she was a lecturer at University of KZN in psychology. So I think I've got some of her kind of thinking and analytical capacity. Got a younger brother, and he's head of marketing at Sea Harvest, Cape Town-based fishing company. So I was kind of entrepreneurial when I was young. Selling basketball cards to my friends at school and that kind of stuff, just to try and make a few extra bucks. Kind of lost that somewhere along the way, and then obviously, it came at me again about 5 years ago.
Tom, Seb's just mentioned there he was entrepreneurially inclined, even if it was in the smallest extent. What about you? Were you a kid? We're talking primary, high school. Were you the guy running the stall at the market day, or thinking about buying low, selling high. There's sometimes these kids who've got these stories about, no, I was the guy, the consummate hustler as a kid. I know I wasn't. That kind of clicked for me later in life. What about for you?
Yeah, it was interesting, so I did get involved. Like I ran the Bishop's tuck shop. Great business. But
Yes.
guys had lots of money to spend.
Sure.
And then at GCT, I was the on the tennis committee, and because we stayed in Smuts, it was right on Upper Campus, and the tennis club was there. And Friday nights, that bar would hum, and I was in charge of the bar, which again, like very profitable business. But it's interesting because I don't think like making money in that sense, like buying something and selling something with a markup, I find it like incredibly boring, to be honest. Obviously, as you grow up, there's more benefits which you don't experience as that side hustle because there's a lifestyle and an independence that comes with being able to support yourself, which is hugely attractive. But the activity of making a profit, like maybe because I didn't have an investment education, it was like, what do I do with this money? And it's obviously not my money as well. It's going back into a little circle thing. I'm not, generating a personal livelihood off it. And I'm not investing that to see that money grow and compound in some other sort of way. I found it quite dry, those activities. But I had enough of an exposure to be like, yeah, a business is fundamentally around generating revenue and profit, and had exposure to those two activities.
Seb, Tom has mentioned now that he was quite engineering inclined, problem solving, systems. I wasn't the kid that ran to the maths table at school, so good for Tom. But from your side, was there something you wanted to be when you grew up? You've gone into actuarial. We'll get into that in a sense. But did you ever have that thing? Were you the doctor's, the doctor to be, the lawyer, the accountant? Or was there just a lot of parental pressure? Yeah,
No, yeah, it wasn't parental pressure at all. I mean, being a doctor never interested me. Being an engineer was not something that also interested me. Like, figuring out how the world around me works wasn't really top of my priority list. Like, I kind of knew it was going to be kind of numbers, money, something like that. Because initially I thought, okay, maybe go into some sort of business. Then I thought accounting. And then, actuarial science kind of hit me because at that stage it was still pretty kind of nascent. It was what you do if you're good at maths kind of thing, right? And I was like, okay, well, I think I'm good at maths. Let's kind of see where this takes me.
Sure.
And funnily enough, I've never worked in traditional actuarial fields. I've never worked for an insurance company or healthcare business or anything like that. But I have been in financial services my whole career.
Okay. Now, fast forward a little bit. The two of you matriculate. You both end up going to UCT. Tom, you do engineering at UCT 2000 and 2003. Sorry if I'm giving away your age here. Seb, same years, actuarial science. How did the two of you meet, and what's the inception of that? You obviously are in business almost 25 years later, crazily enough. How did the two of you meet?
I think both of us were very fortunate enough to get into Smuts Hall, which was a residence at UCT. At the time, they were it was the academic res. They selected for kind of smart students, and I consider myself very fortunate because from Cape Town. Not a lot of Cape Town kids got in or chose to go into residence. It was on a whim that I put in an application, and then when I heard I had been accepted, it was great. The freedom that came with basically living out of home, as an 18-year-old. But not only that, I think for the first time, I mean, we got pictures before. It wasn't, I came from Camps Bay High, and moved midway in high school and found that transition very difficult. I didn't feel, as a sort of a beach boy going into Bishop's, very traditional school, like not a lot of independent thinking allowed. Whereas all of a sudden in Smuts, I was surrounded by like great guys, smart guys from around the country. It was wonderful. It was just a wonderful experience, and that's where we met. We lived in a flat I was there for all 4 years. You were there for?
2
years.
No, sorry, 3 years. 3 years.
Yeah. What are your reflections on Smuts?
Yeah, like Tom says, it was a great place because you had a lot of like-minded people studying all sorts of different things. I don't think I would have got through the degree if it wasn't for having other people studying the same very difficult course around me that I can go to and ask questions and what's going on here, how do I solve this? But yeah, it's like, it was a great kind of support network. And I mean, obviously very convenient because you're on campus, you can wake up whenever and just like roll to class. I mean, yeah, really enjoy. A lot of my like best friends now are like, obviously from school and from the time at Smuts.
So there is some semblance of a friendship there, I assume, between the two of you, because why else would you get into business many years later? Before we get there, though, I'm interested in your backgrounds vocationally. So two very, very different backgrounds. Somehow you've done this almost move very far away from one another to come back to the same passion for solving the same problem. Tom, we'll start with you. I'm curious. You've obviously gone into academia, post academia.
Yeah.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about the decision to do that.
Yeah, I got lucky, I suppose. Getting the Rhodes Scholarship is quite it's an amazing opportunity to go to Oxford and study. And at the time, there weren't a lot of graduate programs, particularly in the sciences. So Oxford's predominantly an undergraduate and a research university. And they started like creating courses for masters, and the quality of those masters weren't very great. And then I think when I heard that I had the opportunity of going straight into a doctorate, despite only having an undergraduate degree, I was like, sure, the ego in me was like, be called doctor by the time I was 27, like sweet. Was tough. I did it in engineering. I did it in biomedical engineering, going back to kind of choosing the social problems, building technology, helping people make better decisions about their health. Very difficult problem, right? You have a technical element to it, but then how that interfaces with an individual's psychology is difficult. And everyone, has a relationship with their health and their body. And I was very passionate about that for a long, long time. And wanted to try to start two companies, both here and then, here in South Africa and in the UK. And when both of those were unsuccessful for reasons we can talk about, yeah, I was like, okay, got to get over to the States. That's where things are happening in health tech. I managed to get a post at MIT to be a research scientist, as a postdoctoral research scientist. But pretended to be an academic while like trying to do some hustles on the side, which is kind of its own thing. There's a lot of freedom to be able to kind of manage your time. So it gave me that. Yeah. But after some time, I kind of gave up the ghost. Healthcare is a really tough problem, especially as I am passionate about preventative health and preventative medicine. So I came back to South Africa 2015 to work for Discovery. And Discovery, as many people know, is doing amazing things in the kind of the vitality space, trying to encourage and incentivize and motivate, drive that behavior change. But then, for, again, a whole host of their own reasons, I was like, I don't think I'm built for working in a corporate. So I was like, okay, time to do it myself. Sure. And that's when I pivoted to financial services.
Yeah, interesting. It's, we're doing a massive disservice to the better part of 15 years of your life there in only a couple of minutes. But
I was a delayed adolescent, let's be honest. Yeah. Like while you're like doing a doctorate at Oxford, you're living a great life.
No, I'm sure.
And I was add on to that. I think it was 2005. I went to go visit Tom because I was in the UK, so he was in Oxford. I took a train up, went to see him, like stayed with him. Went to dinner that day in the dinner hall. Like he gave me this what's this thing? The
academic gown.
Academic gown. You rock up. We had salmon. Like he swiped his card. We had a bottle of wine. It was like, I can get used to this academic life.
It's just not the same as doing a doctorate here. No, I don't think so. But
you're wearing tweed. You're enjoying life.
All of our Harry Potter fans. This is what happens in real life. Yeah. But an amazing story, and obviously amazing exposure to institutions really at the cutting edge of certainly health tech and research and academia, Oxford, MIT, Discovery. We'll come back to some of that on top. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, just one other thing, and I think it was on the back of that experience at academia, and like to Oxford's credit, like the best academics I ever met, it all came down to asking good questions and solving good problems. Like there's a quality to a problem. So, all problems are not the same. and how you solve them and how you go about like phrasing that question to solve that problem, again, is all questions are not the same. So then it's like, okay, well, if you can solve any problem, or if you're inclined to solve problems, like choose a good one, you know? And I think that's definitely been a motivator for me to be like, yeah, the problem that we're trying to solve is like, it's hairy, it's meaty, like it's not a lot of people try solve it. But in my mind, that speaks to its, the quality of the challenge and the quality of actually setting out to try and solve it.
I think it's great context, and we'll get into more of how you've gone about trying to do that, as well as maybe referencing some of those first few business attempts that didn't go well, but nonetheless lessons. Before we get there, Seb, I want to just go into a little bit of your professional background before getting into this crazy roller coaster that's been Franc, I'm sure. You joined Nedbank out of university, and you mentioned that you didn't really do much in the actuarial sciences space. So talk to me about joining big banking institution. What was the thinking there? Was it just cool? Let's rack up some experience. You spent a number of years in financial services as well, and so maybe share a little bit about that with our audience.
Yeah, it was the only job I could get.
There we go. It's as easy as that. The salmon and tweet was taken.
Yeah.
Yes.
So coming out of an actuarial degree, a lot of the guys in the class had bursaries with the big insurance businesses. So a lot of the guys had Old Mutual bursaries, Sanlam bursaries, Liberty, Metropolitan, whatever. I didn't, because my mom was a lecturer. You sometimes you qualified for funding from a university if the university that your parent works at doesn't have the course. So I got funding from that, so I didn't need to go to an insurance business for a bursary. Which meant that a lot of the spots at those businesses were taken. And I went for a couple of interviews. I remember going to Old Mutual. I went to healthcare, one or two other places, and nothing really grabbed me. I interviewed at Nedbank. It was called Nedbank Corporate at the time. It was effectively the investment bank. And the good thing about this was it was a graduate program, so you were going to rotate through like a lot of the divisions in the bank, and effectively, if you liked a division and they kind of liked you, you would stick around. So there, the optionality kind of made a lot more sense for me, so I can see like what's going on in the different business units. And there was nothing else available. But I joined Nedbank, part of the graduate program, rotated through business banking, property finance, treasury, asset management, debt capital markets, and then finally corporate finance, which is M&A, and that's where I stuck around, and I was in that team for a better part of 6 years after.
Amazing. I mean, that's I think that is still one of the great perks, right, of that rotation, is just seeing what the heck happens in this giant machine of a financial institution, only to settle on something they are good at and care about. Nonetheless, 6 years is a chunk of time in your 20s. You eventually leave and join Brimstone. And not everyone will know who Brimstone is. It's a significant business, of course. You spent about 8 years of your life there in many different roles, wearing many different hats. So maybe just share with us a little bit of that experience as well, because it's presumably also created this foresight for you to go, man, there are some problems in the space, and I'm quite adamant to solve these before the two of you reconverge on trying to solve this problem together. So maybe share with us, what is that whole journey like?
Yeah, so when I was at Nedbank, I was part of the advisory team that advised Brimstone on certain transactions. And I think Brimstone at the time were like, we're paying Nedbank too much in fees. Let's just hire these guys to be our internal corporate finance team. And that's kind of what happened. So left Nedbank 2010 to join Brimstone, then effectively to be in-house kind of M&A. So to look at the transactions, raise funding for the business and that kind of stuff. For the people that don't know, Brimstone is an investment holding company. So listed on the stock exchange, they take stakes in other listed and unlisted businesses. With hopefully, those businesses grow in value, and then similarly, the share price of Brimstone should grow in value. That's the ultimate aim, right? Mm-hmm. So slightly different in that, like before you're in advisory, you kind of you help a company buy another company, or raise funding or do a BE deal or list or whatever.
Sure.
But, you do the transaction and then your participation is done. There's not much accountability going forward. As long as you've done a good job, the companies, they tell you what they want to do and you implement it for them and you kind of like step away. Here, it's slightly different because you have to account for the decisions. You're going to say, okay, we're going to buy 20% in company X. And then obviously if company X does well, then you can take some of the credit. If it does badly, then, the buck stops with you as the team, right? Because your job is to make good investment decisions. So it was a slightly different role. But yeah, like you said, kind of, I was always interested in investments, like from like I would say from my fourth year in university, I was always interested in investments. And that is the kind of the actuarial qualification that I have. Because when you qualify as an actuary, the last exam that you do, like the major exam, you kind of like specialize in something, and can be life insurance, can be short-term insurance, can be pensions, and investments was something that was reasonably new at the time, and that's the one I did. So yeah, I've always had that kind of passion for investments, and with Brimstone, you learned a lot more about in the investment world, I guess. Sure. Very different world to someone working in Coronation and Aaron Gray, though, because it's a different kind of mindset. You're taking big stakes in businesses. You can even gear them, and get into that long story. But then I left Brimstone, like you say, after close to 8 years. Took a bit of a break, and like over the last that time 15 years of my career, I'd always helped, because I was in financial services, always had people asking me for advice, say, hey, Seb, I've got this extra 1,000 rand, what should I do? I've got this extra 5, whatever, and you helping people one-on-one that were smart people. They just weren't very good with money matters, or just didn't want to go to a financial advisor. So yeah, when Tom came to me and said, like, this is what my vision is for Franc, is to help people invest. Yeah, to me, it made a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. So I guess this is where the crux comes, and I'm super curious. The two of you, in many respects, are leading pretty blazing corporate careers in your 30s. You've stepped away from an exec position at Brimstone, significant business. Tom, you're essentially leading digital product innovation at Vitality. Obviously, this problem matters enough that the two of you go, man, this is enough for us to go all in on. But maybe just talk to me about what that time in your lives is like. So you've alluded to it very briefly. Now, Seb, you've taken a break, and you always knew this was a problem, and Tom's kind of brought you in on this thing he was thinking about. So maybe Tom, lead the answer here and just tell us, what is this moment like? You've also had two ventures that didn't go so well, so wouldn't have blamed you if you thought, hey, starting another business wasn't the way to go about solving this thing. But what convinces you in a senior position, probably could have worked anywhere in the world, to step away? And what was it like at the time? Were both of you just so cash flush? You were like, cool, we've got years to do with our time, whatever we feel like. What is the time like? Maybe because and again, just context for that is almost every founder has faced that moment in their life and most don't make the leap. And that's what I'm curious about here as our audience.
Yeah, no, it's important. And I've thought about it a lot. And I think for me, it really came down to that experience at Discovery. So prior to that, as mentioned, was an academic. I had a lot of freedom, and I'd developed, let's call it like a robust way of thinking. If anything, I trust my mind to be able to kind of like tackle unknowns and solve problems and figure it out. And so working within that corporate, there were two fundamental experiences. The first is, obviously I was earning a great salary. So it was now, what do you do with your money? And I, unlike Seb, there was no financial, like a pilot and a maths teacher both made bad financial decisions, but that's their own thing. I hadn't thought about investing or doing anything really meaningful. I dabbled in sort of online trading, but not in a sense of, more like going to the casino as opposed to like actually thinking about it. Knowing that I was entering the job market relatively late in life, as opposed to other guys who had, got into the work market a lot earlier, I knew I had to make smart decisions. So I applied my mind to thinking about what that would mean. And I believe when you approach investing from a kind of a first principles perspective, it actually is quite simple. You want to get into kind of low cost index tracking equity. Don't try time the market, just like, get a good strategy for what you want to achieve and then execute, right? And set up structures to pay yourself first, fundamentally, put that money away. But that was almost impossible to do. I had some advisor come chat to me and trying to sell me snake oil, and I responded to him with a little like spreadsheet model of being like, is this how your product policy works out over time? And he didn't reply to my mail. So I was like, something obviously is dodgy here. And the moment you scratch under the surface, you realize there's a lot of opaqueness in terms of what's actually going on when it comes to investing, a lot of fees that eat away at people's returns. And I was like, Jack, I can't afford that, right? I'm too late in my life to pay some dude a retarded fee for expensive product. So I think there was a personal part of that experience. And then the other was just, as mentioned, like some people work well in corporates.
Sure.
Not me. It's maybe different if you're Adrian Gore and you're running the business, but like, being some medium-sized fish in a big pond, like wasn't my style, So I think there are 2 times you can take risk in your life, that you can take risk when you have no liabilities, you're young and but the problem then is you don't know anything. Obviously, if you go into a career and you develop your skill set, you have the opportunity of having some sort of protective base. And that protective base for me was my wife.
Sure.
I got married like just before I left Discovery. Got married end of 2017, and then 6 months later, I was like, okay, bon voyage to the income, which I did with the support of my wife. I think she could see that I, wasn't enjoying sticking around in that. And I think a healthy tension, she pushed me to get to a stage where like, you can't just go out with an idea. So I was working evenings, getting a prototype ready, building, learning how to build apps, building apps, actually left Discovery. And then like a month later, the app was in the App Store. So I was confident enough that I'd actually had something that, people wanted and people needed. And that was enough of a market traction to be able to say, okay, take the risk.
Sure.
Now's the time. There is a support network. So I think people need to be, either have no liabilities or very low liabilities, or have a way of supporting yourself where you know that actually you can take that risk. That would be, my 2 cents advice.
I think it's great advice, because we often see founders lack sobriety entirely, and they just make the leap, or they're just way too safe, right? And so I think this is great perspective for anyone listening in on the episode. We trust you're enjoying today's episode, produced in partnership with First National Bank. We're now going to take a quick break and hear from FNB's Sandile Philip before getting back to today's conversation.
Hi everyone, my name is Sandile. I'm from FNB. I'm the National Head of Sales, FNB Commercial Lending. FNB, we pride ourselves as a financial solutions provider where we centered around help. We help entrepreneurs run their personal banking, transitioning into their business. Where there's life events that take place throughout their journey, we want to be there with them. Whether you're starting up your business as a tech startup, as it grows, we want to be there. As you scale, you grow your business, we want to be there with you. When you want to buy, we want to be there with you in the journey. When you look for, buyers, or you look for partners to grow your business, going to other countries, we want to walk the journey with you. As you go into retirement stage, we want to help you invest your money. So we want to make sure that we give you help beyond just banking. Startups, innovative startups specifically, are key. If you look at the challenges that we are faced with in South Africa, a lot of them have been resolved and solved and solutioned for by tech startups. As FNB, as we've been voted for many years as an innovative bank, we don't just want to be in that journey alone. We want to be a preferred partner for innovators. We want to be seen as partners to South Africans. As I've said, whether you are an individual who's just going through a life-changing event, you're moving from being a learner, which we cater for, to being a student. We want to walk that journey with you. You looking at buying your first car, we want to be there with you. And you looking at starting up your business, we want to be the bank, the preferred partner in your event. So the help that we provide, we want to be your partner. Where we give you all the help. We partner with you. We walk the journey with you. So we believe, this is a type of help that really changes your life. So. Startups is a space that I think is misunderstood by a lot. I think even more so in the tech startup space, because it's different to other businesses. And as FNB, we want to really take the time and really understand startups and not just provide financial solutions or vanilla financial solutions. We want to walk the journey with them. So yes, we're not always going to be able to have solutions for everything. But we have an ecosystem through our NAV marketplace. The customers or clients of some of these startups are our clients. How do we link the two? Make sure that we provide, a marketplace, a market for the startups that we are supporting. So for us, it's critical that we really, really back the startups, give them access to the market, support them, and create platforms where like-minded people can engage, and that the founders as well, they feel like they are supported, they are walked through the journey, and they're given the right tools. And for us, that's the support that we want to give to the startup businesses. You want to make an impact in society. We made that available, so where you can really extend your help beyond, your family or your employees to the society. So we provide those solutions. So that's why we have this theme that help changes everything. As a bank that's been around for over 180 years, we believe in sustainability. Tech startups are not just there as a gimmick, and we haven't won the awards that we've won because we were just innovative for the sake of innovative. We were solving real problems and providing real solutions. We believe partnerships like we have now with Startup Club and other tech organizations are actually helping us, not just us to sustain ourselves over the next 180 years, but also to create a solution and help our clients in South Africa and the world, for the next generation. So it is important that we continue to nurture relationships like this, where we create a platform to have like-minded solutions providers in one platform where they can share ideas, have investors looking at how they can fund and scale businesses like this. So we want to be there and partner and provide a platform where we can enable. For us, relationships is everything. We call ourselves a relationship bank because for us to properly solution for you, we have to understand you. So we provide banking, just solutions beyond banking for you as an individual, for your business, as well as for your family. But reality is, individuals vary. If you are a student, one day you think about being a tech founder, startup founder. It is important that you start the journey with us as FNB, and we walk the journey with you, where you start consuming our products. You learn about how to conduct yourself, financially, improve your financial position. And one day you are going to be a founder. If you understand and you've built a relationship long enough with FNB, But that you've built a relationship with a good credit record. You understand how we support startups. What tools we have in our NAV market, that are available to support you, where we create an ecosystem for you, where you can design your products and market your product within our NAV marketplace. So basically, for us, the ideal person is someone who wants to build a long-term relationship with us, because we believe in relationship building. South African entrepreneurs, besides their passion for the country, the love for the country, I love the determination. I love their can-do attitude. I love how resilient we are. The fact that we partner with anyone for the betterment of, firstly, this country, but also our society. And it's through this, I think, that we've weathered a lot of storms. COVID, if you look at us versus other countries, the way we've navigated the COVID pandemic, I think we came out of it stronger, and the spirit of innovation hasn't died. It has actually escalated even more, where now people are more passionate about the country. Having said all of this, our commitment to SA Inc., and I know a lot of people are committed as much as we are. When South Africa does well, thrives, we thrive too. So if you want to know more, about FNB, about the solutions, about really how do we extend help beyond banking and make sure that help changes everything, you can contact us, on www.fnb.co.za. You can contact me, Sandile, 060-973-6243, or go to our app. You can navigate through NAV Marketplace, and then you can see what solutions and offering we have there. Any banking as well, for you or your business or your family, all the solutions are there. Thank you. Look forward to engaging more with you.
That was Sandile Philip, the National Head of Sales and Commercial Lending at FNB. Thanks so much for listening, and now back to today's episode. Seb, you've obviously joined at a point where you'd left Brimstone. And what was the interaction like with Tom? Were you guys close at this point? Were you catching up regularly? And it just so happened he said, "Oh, by the way, Seb, I'm thinking about starting this thing, and this is the app I've been working on late at night. What do you think? Does it make sense?" And because again, this is to Tom's point, such a meaty, hairy problem. Savings culture, breaking down these barriers to entry, the super opaque industry where fees are ridiculous. You could have skinned this cat, so to speak, in many, many different ways. I'm curious, why get on the bandwagon here? What was that interaction like?
Yeah, so we, the flat that Tom mentioned, we kind of try and get together whenever we can. We've got guys spread all over the world, but we kind of keep in contact. So we had been keeping in contact. The first iteration of Franc, though, wasn't what it is now. It was, kind of saving an excess for high value items like your laptops and cell phones and that kind of stuff. And when I was at Brimstone, Tom came to me and said, "This is, because I was in the investment world, he's like, okay, this is my plan." And I was like, I don't know, that didn't really resonate that strongly with me.
Sure.
And then the next time we chatted, he was like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. It's pure, savings and investment." And then that kind of like, okay, that makes more sense. And at that stage, to answer your earlier question, I was 38. I just left Brimstone. Luckily, I'd been investing, the past 15 years, so I had enough of a safety net to kind of take a leap. No dependence. So it's like, if I don't do it now, I'm kind of never going to do it. And funnily enough, like one of the ideas I had about if I had to do my own thing was to effectively build a passive investment business, but not targeting consumers, effectively targeting institutional funds. So what he was doing, it's similar. I mean, obviously fundamentally different, but yeah,
Sure.
You're kind of solving a similar problem.
Sure. So there are very few. Not a lot of precedent for building a tech startup in Africa. Certainly not building a consumer savings platform in Africa as well. What was your thinking around solving the problem the way that you were thinking about it? Maybe talk to us about this. You're saying you had an app live within a month of leaving Discovery. What was that point of knowing, okay, I'm onto something here, well, this is how this problem should be solved?
Yeah. So there was one experience that I had, which was, I think, quite influential for me, and it was very short, but influential nonetheless. Yes. So I did an internship as a product manager at Google in Zurich at the end of my doctorate because I needed cash. But it was also amazing because the way Google solves problems, they've solved all of their solutions themselves. They hire great engineers and they we need this. This is a problem. Let's solve it. Sure. So the attitude or the mindset is it can be done, right? And so that's always stayed with me. And you chat to many engineers, and even our CTO is a classic thing. Kyle, worked with me at Discovery and then went on to work at Amazon, AWS. Yeah, engineer classic. You're like, no, we can do that. We can do anything, And I think they're having a sort of some hubris around being able to tackle a problem like that meant that the way in which we went about solving it came with some frustrations and challenges, but it was the only way a business like this can work is if your cost base is low, right? And the only way you can get your cost base low is you can't be paying some tech vendor some monthly minimum usage fee, right? You're never going to survive. So you've got to be super, super efficient on your cost base. And that means you've got to build your own tech. Okay, so you build your own tech. And I think
you built the first version of the app yourself?
The first version, from the back end, from the processing functions and the front end application. Obviously now that's matured and we've got a team of engineers now working on that. But I think that gave us a little bit of flexibility. There was one other company, Jupiter Save, we started at the same time. They didn't choose that route. They chose to partner and didn't make it for a bunch of reasons. Sure. And I think but that was one of them. So I think the way, at least I've approached it, is taking on, and I suppose it's been a constant mantra. In finance, very often people are capitalizing on some information asymmetry. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, it's too complicated. Oh, the compliance is such a, you don't want to do that. Pay us rather instead. That's the basic theme, which I call horseshit. That's
the financial services.
That's space, the financial services space. And now what's interesting is you see a number of really successful Stripe. Oh no, you can't be a Visa or a MasterCard. Why not? We can do that. We can build it. Yoko, you can't go into the payment space. That's for banks. And I think you see very successful guys where they actually do take on the challenge. It's not to say that those challenges aren't significant, but they're not insurmountable. They're not impossible. Sure. You just need to kind of have the balls to do it and just say okay, let's, get on the phone, you call the regulator, you find somebody who knows something, you do the paperwork, et cetera, et cetera.
That's great wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. Seb, I'm curious. Obviously, you're launching a financial services product, highly regulated space. Tom has built the app, first version of the app himself. Tom, I'm sure you're a wonderful engineer and can build apps super well. But in its first iteration or first iterations, how did this go from being and maybe talk to the audience about what did the first product actually look like? What did it do? Did it allow you to invest? I know early on you guys were getting into money market funds and a little bit of equity tracking, and that's obviously matured over time. What did the first product look like? And then you're having to solve some hurdles in terms of holding cash in accounts, and there's some regulatory oversight there required. What did that look like as this product takes shape in kind of 2018?
Yeah, so I joined the team May 19. So
Okay.
so like Tom said, the first version was already out. I think maybe they had 100 customers or something like that had money. A few 100,000 rand or something was on the platform. But I think Tom knew at the time that was kind of just to was built to kind of just say hello, and then at the same time we had hired a team, ops, engineer and design to effectively rebuild it. So yeah, when I joined, it was already Operation Rebuild was happening, and that took, let's say, 4 or 5 months, and then we kind of like went live with a new version of the app in like October. And then kind of in my naive head, I thought, okay, now this app looks great. Once you launch it, build it and they will come kind of thing. It's gonna fly off the shelf.
Yes.
Which obviously didn't happen.
Sure.
Because we weren't
we'll talk about that now.
we weren't spending anything on marketing. What did happen at the time, which did give us a bit of a boost, was we won the MTN App of the Year award for the best South African solution. So that was like a month after the launch of the new app, which, obviously gives you a lot of free publicity and that kind of stuff. But, like then maybe we had like 40 signups or something, it's like
not enough to move the traction needle on an early stage venture.
Yeah.
Tom, maybe then just, as Seb's alluded to, he's joined kind of full-time 2019. What was the first iteration of the product, and how do you even go about starting to build something in that space,
Yeah, so I think from the get-go, it was always relatively simple investment philosophy, goal-based. We are licensed to provide automated advice, and what makes the most sense is to do so based on what you want to achieve. So even today, the experience is like, let's understand your risk capacity, and that was in kind of the first version of the app. And then it's like, okay, once we understand a little bit about you as an individual, what do you want to do? Recommend the first thing to do for any person is to have a bit of emergency savings. So like that cash fund you mentioned. And then the moment you start thinking further and further out, being able to expose the person appropriately to some investment risk. And that was through index tracking, Satrix 40, top 40 companies on the stock exchange. So that was kind of, MVP. That was what it was. And yeah, in a sense, we've kept that sort of goal-based theme, that advice is goal-based. Each goal has its own strategy, which I think is appropriate. And as mentioned earlier, the best way to invest is to think upfront about like, what is a good strategy here? And then just stick with it, right? Because every time you try and respond to the market or freak out, you tend to undermine some of the gains that you've already done, whether that's, getting out of a position and realizing losses. It's better just to kind of like, okay, this is a long-term goal. I've just got to keep on putting in my like contribution every month, in order to realize that goal. So that's been sort of a common theme. It did look very different. And so that, the design, I suppose that was another, part of me I haven't spoken about. I really loved art. And so I'm a believer, especially when it comes to human-computer interaction, that it has to be beautiful. It has to be intuitive. Like you see that with why Apple products are so successful. It needs that in order to have that sort of relationship. So invested a lot in trying to make the design and the experience intuitive, and we still do invest a lot of time and energy in trying to make it simple, beautiful, and intuitive.
You launch this product, you get a few hundred users on the platform. Obviously, one of the big challenges in building a B2C business of this nature is you're trying to keep the cost base as low as possible, both internally, but also then you don't want to pass any of that on to the customer unwillingly, right? Especially if that completely defeats the point. I'm curious, 2018, 2019, you start winning some awards, you take home a Seedstars award as well, you start getting a little bit more notoriety around the business. At some point, you probably need a bit of capital. And innately most founders are not starting with capital. They're having to raise capital in this market. You talk about bringing on some team from presumably well-paying employers, and often the best engineers or team are in it for the equity, but they also want to make sure they offset some of that risk. Did you guys have to raise capital early, and how was that first iteration around this time, perhaps, as the business is gaining more traction?
Maybe just to start, were you on board when Halls gave us that offer, or not yet?
I joined just after, so we were kind of still talking to them.
Okay. So tell us about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, this is where I'm still eternally grateful that Seb joined, because my passion is product. My expertise are kind of technical, not necessarily business.
Sure.
So, and I largely had the experience of being overseas, so in the UK and the US, where especially in the US, capital flows freely and the startup scene is very mature and you get cash for ideas, So the fact that I had a product in the market, already had some users, I was like, oh man, this isn't going to be a problem. So after the Seedstars win, spoke to an investor. They were keen to come in, but instead of like signing anything, getting term sheet, taking the money, I was like, oh, I just want to raise so much, trying to get some other guys involved, just like, kept him a little bit on the side, without losing him. So there was interest there,
Sure.
but instead of actually just closing the deal, which was the lesson to take away, I didn't. And then a few months later, this was now beginning 2019, like Jan 2019, one of their portfolio companies in the US had a big tax event and basically dried up the liquidity in this entity. So the guy, you get that horrible call and he was like, sorry, man, we've got no cash. Love your business, love to be a part of it, but sorry, got nothing. I was like the worst feeling to get that voice message after a flight. And I was like, don't do that. So I think after that, we had to, as a team, come together. And I suppose it's worthwhile touching a little bit on the slicing pie because I felt that like it enabled us to do it effectively. So slicing pie is, for people who are listening, slicingpie.com. It's a way of managing early stage equity within a business. So instead of doing the crude back of the envelope calc, I get 20%, you get 40%, he gets like 40%. You can actually structure that agreement. So, you measure what contributions are put into the business, and that includes cash, it includes time, it includes relationships, and it includes IP. And you can reward those contributions appropriately.
Amazing.
So even for the, group of people that I'd been able to get together in that early stage, which is again one of the lessons, don't try to do it yourself, like bring people on board. Yeah, people were able and willing to put some cash in. So we effectively bootstrapped the business, but the incentive was clear for those who were putting cash in, what it would mean in terms of the equity that you were buying for that input.
Okay. And again, that's slicingpie.com for listeners here today. If you've not heard of that, we get a lot of questions around ESOPs and incentivizing employees, and that could just be a nice life hack for the founders listening in. Okay, you bootstrap the business. You've got some proof points in market. You haven't raised a venture round. Could be a blessing in disguise. We'll get into that now. Seb, 2020 hits obviously super formative time. In the world, COVID, lockdowns, almost every face-to-face interaction is halted for the better part of 12 months. What is that season like for Franc? What is it like for you guys running the business internally? And then what's it like just in terms of customers, right? How are you building in this space now that, of course, is a digital-first offering and still comparably quite new to the market?
Yeah, so, like Tom said, just from a funding perspective, we bootstrap, but at the end of 2019, we realized, okay, we need to start raising some external cash. I think we probably got our first external investment beginning of 2020. So the Brosen family, who I worked with very closely at Brimstone, they were our initial backer. And then shortly after that, Chris Lister James has also backed quite a few local startups, also invested. And then, March hits, and then that's COVID, right? And then the fundraising kind of dries up. Luckily, we've got enough from those first two investors to kind of see us through the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months, I think. But yeah, it still was growing very slowly. We like I said, the MTN press helped us a bit. We had started spending a bit on marketing, but the numbers were pretty small. That being said, once COVID did hit, and I think this helped a lot of digital businesses, the numbers started going up, right? Because people, more time at home, more time on their phone, more time saying, hey, I should have been prepared for this event. Now I've got no money. How can I solve for this the next time anything like this happens, right? So we saw some interest in where we were, having a few, let's say 200 new registrations a month that went to 600, for example. Still very small, but for us it was a change, a market change in the numbers.
Sure.
But yeah, that's kind of the lay of the land in kind of the early mid 2020.
And just what is, sorry, Tom, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, there's also, I think, operational from the team dynamic.
Please.
So, I don't know why or how, but we're just already by that stage, already set up like a remote, tech first way of operating. So Slack communication, Jira, project management, Google Workspace, shared docs, shared drives. Like there was no physical need for guys to be together in order to do their job. So when COVID did lock down the world, it wasn't much of an issue. We could continue just to operate as a team quite effectively. We didn't have to, it wasn't a new introduction to kind of like, okay, now we've got to have like virtual meetings as opposed to face-to-face meetings, or, we've got to start adopting some of these technologies to help us operate. So it actually wasn't disruptive from an operational perspective too much. Just to add on to what Seb was saying about the larger market dynamics.
Sure. I'm curious, and I'll maybe insert the question here. What is that, if you've been comparably remote first from almost day one, what's that been like, just building team culture? Buy-in from folks, a bit of accountability, a bit of carrying the mission alongside one another, especially going through the tough stuff that can be hard. How's that been at Franc?
Yeah, so it's easier when you can try and get together, and we've always tried to get together every kind of, at the beginning, let's say every 6 months. Now we've changed so that we kind of like, we still mainly remote, but we work 1 day a week in the office. So, and we've got team members in Joburg and Cape Town, and we do the same in both places. So, yeah, I mean, even like during COVID, we often had to like try to organize like, drinks on a Friday or every second Friday, just even if it's virtual, just get people, just sharing the same space, even if it's virtual. But yeah, I think we've got a good culture, this young, dynamic, reasonably kind of flat structure. We don't have a huge team, so I think that also kind of helps, and everyone's pulling in the same direction. But yeah, often it's like when you read about culture, it's not like what does happen, it's what doesn't happen, right? So and I think we good there.
Gents, I'm curious to know, you've raised some capital at the start of that year. It is an interesting season in the world, but hopefully, to your point, you started even validating the Franc use case, the Franc, almost like stickiness with customers, probably a little bit more. This is a numbers game. I know that we'll get into some of those numbers in time, but presumably you do need to raise some capital 2021. Does that happen?
Yeah, so we actually kept that round, the first external capital that came in, we kept that round open. Effectively, the term was open for 18 months almost?
Well,
So it was sort of a running raise. I think my one retrospective would be, because obviously global markets was flush with cash, because of the stimulus that was being thrown into the market. It's my view now that VC very much is a cyclical ecosystem. So when there is cash in the market, go raise a lot, and all the valuations are up. It's a beneficial time to do so. And I think in retrospect, I don't know what you think now, Seb, but I think we were quite prudent, being okay, well, we only want to dilute so much, and here's what this is what we can think. But he actually never ever had any pushback on our valuation, which means that there probably was some headroom. We probably could have pushed it up, right? So you can figure out the maths. We could have raised more, I think, at a higher valuation, which would have given us more ammunition, more runway to be able to kind of keep on building and learning.
And I guess B2C business needs that, right? It needs longer time to become a household name. I think despite that though, 2021. It's quoted you guys grew 400% year on year in your customer base, which is impressive by any measure.
Coming off a low base, we could also do the numbers, right?
For sure. Well, it's not 1 to 4, right? Or 1 to 5, but it's nonetheless still impressive. I think on the back of that, you also in time, you've gone through Google for Startups Accelerator. You've also gone through RMB's late Alpha Code Incubator. Very quick anecdote. Are those programs beneficial? Would you recommend these things? Can they be more distracting than value adding? How you guys have done a lot of these now. How useful have you found them to be?
You want to comment on the Google?
Yeah. So just to correct you. So we worked out of the Alpha Code space, but we're never part of the incubator.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
Yeah. And we obviously, like you said, we were part of the Google for startups, as well as Grindstone. I think we've been through all of them, and I think they are valuable. Some of the stuff that you get access to, especially on like the Google side, because there you're getting access to tech experts who have in different markets who have kind of been there and done that, right? Which in the South African context is a challenge, right? That's where we first got introduced to like Google, the sprints and, design thinking and, all that kind of stuff where it might be very prevalent in like Silicon Valley, but here no one had really heard of it,
Sure.
So I think that, and then Grindstone, also you're meeting more like local founders, or like some of which we still like keep in contact with. Some of the stuff is more localized in terms of the content, which also helps. So I think different ones have different benefits. I wouldn't say if we had the chance, we wouldn't do any of them. I mean, I think we got value from Google, we got value from Grindstone, we got value from the Visa one. I think they were all beneficial.
One thing I would add on the Alpha Code one, because it was a shared workspace fundamentally, but it was a very specific shared workspace because every other person in there was a founder as part of the startup.
And a fintech founder.
Yeah. And I think, again, a piece of advice is like, this is a hard psychological journey. So surrounding yourself both intimately, if you're in a co-founding environment, that's helpful, very, very helpful. But also being surrounded by other founders, right? Because you can commiserate, you can learn lessons, you can share knowledge, hugely, hugely valuable. So I will always be very grateful for Alpha Code for providing a space for, founders to come together and have free office space. I mean, again, take away some of the liabilities of running a startup. You can't afford an office when you can't, when you don't have the revenue to justify it. Mm-hmm. So a fantastic resource, both from a community, but also from a practical perspective.
Fair. Yeah, and probably undervalued by a number of founders listening. Today is just that beauty and association and that sharpening of thinking and that support that you've mentioned as well. 2022 seems to be a pretty formative year in the life of Franc. And we'll get into some of the roller coaster moments here now because, of course, we're painting a lot of highlights reels. You launch your B2B play, Franc Business. You take another accolade home from MTN App of the Year, raise a seed round from 40X. Was that still on the same terms? Yeah, still on the same terms. So you're almost closing out that seed round now with them coming in. And then into 2023, you raise some more cash from ASISA ESD, the Savings Institute. For the most part, if you read the headlines, you see the stories, like this has been a pretty exponential journey, right? The growth curve has been up and to the right, but that's just never the reality in building a startup in this country, of course. And you've shared some pretty good anecdotes and wisdom already around maybe raising a little bit more earlier, thinking about strategically around what you would have done in hindsight. And I'd love to just take the opportunity to go into, we'll get into where Franc is going, obviously, today and what remains the mission, but where have been some of the really tough parts of building this, some of the stuff you didn't even know you didn't know, if you don't mind sharing those. And obviously two very different personalities, different roles in a COO and CEO, and I'm curious to hear both of your perspectives in what has also, I guess, matured the two of you and the business to the point where it is today.
You want to go first? Seb? Yeah, I mean, I think we've been lucky in that. So in my career, I'd never managed people. Always kind of did my own thing. Here is the first time I had to kind of manage people, and I think overall we've been blessed. Like the people in the team have been good. We haven't had many problems in terms of staff. So I would say that kind of, I know a lot of people that I speak to have a lot of problems with their team. So I think that's kind of a tick for us. I think generally from a tech perspective, the stack and stuff that we've chosen has worked for us, maybe bar Ionic to Flutter change. So that's also kind of tick. Obviously, the product, we still believe in what we're doing and the mission and that kind of stuff. Fundraising and scaling, two biggest challenges, but that's probably the same for every tech business out there, especially in a South African B2C space. I think the one thing that we would have probably done differently, if we go back to the beginning, is just like trying to be more intentional about monetizing a lot earlier. Like now we've got 10 different revenue streams at the moment, and at the beginning we had one, and we could have easily have made that one 3 or 4, just leveraging the exact same processes that we were running.
It's great wisdom.
So yeah, and customers, I mean, obviously we're trying to provide them a good service at a good price, but they're also willing to pay for things like convenience. Someone wants their money ASAP. Okay, you can have your money ASAP, but you gotta pay a bit more. So yeah, things like that. Just being smarter about how we actually make money, because obviously the mission is one thing, but we also need to be sustainable and survive.
Gotta be a viable business. Yeah. And the market, I think, globally is sobering to that, right? It's not just users and names in an inbox and a database. It's like, okay, how are we going to make this thing work? And it's ironic, of course, in a financial services product, right, where often that's overlooked. Tom, to your point?
Yeah, so for me, thinking, and I agree with Seb, by the way, just on that insight. For me, it was around marketing. Both Seb and I, it was a gap in our skill set. As Seb mentioned, build it and people will come was the kind of collective thinking. And we didn't have an in-house marketing person. And I think outsourcing something as fundamental as that, you don't have the same level of kind of real accountability. So we were able to do so, and now have done so. But somebody also mentioned something quite profound to me, which is I think it was the Airbnb founder, was like, he thinks about product like a restaurant, where the cooks are the engineers and the front of house are your growth team. And as a user, your experience of a restaurant is actually got to do with both. Like, how are you presented with a menu? How was it explained? But also, how was the food? Was it tasty? Was it delicious? Did you walk away with an overall positive experience?
Sure.
So if you think of like growth, and which is the communication of the product and the actual experience of the product being two sides of very much the same coin. Yeah, it was just like a penny drop moment. Like, we can't afford not to take growth as seriously as it needs to take, So, and that's just meant that we've had to adapt our personal skill set, bring on the people that have that sort of skill set, give them a lot of autonomy and a lot of power to be able to kind of like make, decisions around how they want to present that, but also make sure that the communication lines between the sort of the cooks and the front of house are very strong, right? So that you've got, you're all on the same team. It's not like, throw something over the wall and just expect the cooks to make it. Vice versa, the cooks want to come up with ideas and have to like present a meal to the front of house and be like, okay, guys, think about how to sell this. So yeah, that for me was a lesson learned, but learned too late. I'd say rather having done that, brought growth in-house in 2018 even, would have given us like 2-3 years head start from where we are now.
I mean, growth was in-house. It's just we didn't have enough full-time resources.
Sure.
I think that's the main challenge. Yeah.
I mean, it's a great insight, because most folks would think, well, in the order of priority, I need to get product people in immediately, right? So I've got control over this and manage the cost base. And then a lot of folks bring in agencies, right? They bring even to manage sales funnels and marketing and PR and all these things that ultimately bring people through the door. So I think really, really good wisdom in hindsight to be sharing with the founders here. I'm curious, and in our last couple of minutes here, without you giving away your holy grails or what you think is finally working after much learned experience, the financial services space, the banks, the insurers, the investment houses, this is a really, like, they are probably some of the biggest above the line marketing spenders out there. How does a startup actually break into the space, especially in the B2C space, right? It's one of the biggest challenges. But what have you found has actually worked? I know you are big on education. You also built some really interesting channels, I'm sure, customer pipelines. Have you thought about that, or how did you think about that, and how are you thinking about that now? Because that's just such wonderful learned wisdom that I think founders could benefit.
I think just one thing to mention here is the more recent kind of analysis around like customers, top customers. And again, part of it came through a conversation with other founders about, their experience in this regard. And the other was also just, everyone should be investing, everyone should be taking vitamins, but not everyone is. And we are one investment platform of many. You can go to a bank, you can go to a trading platform. So why go with Franc, the sort of the assisted goal-based kind of experience? And I think trying to understand who we really resonate with, and that's a combination of some data analysis, but also then directly talking to customers, and became very, very obvious that okay, this is our sweet spot. It happens to be women between the ages of 20 and 35 who are thinking about their future, their careers, wanting to take ownership of their own finances, make good decisions, don't necessarily want to invest, active headspace to trying to, manage their own portfolio. Like Franc for them is a very attractive product. And so to go to your question about how do you then compete, I don't think that particular target market is being served. Financial services are still predominantly mansplained, which I think a lot of young, intelligent women are like, no thanks. Actually, I want to be empowered. I want to take control of my finances. And then marketing to a very specific user, you then are doing things slightly differently, right? You don't have to have the massive billboard. You can use influence. You can figure out how to kind of get, where do these women go? What are they doing? Instagram is strong. YouTube is strong. Okay, let's create really good content, invest in creating good content, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, that learning is hopefully just going to be reinforced now.
Super helpful.
For the B2C side.
Yeah, super helpful. Seb, did you want to comment there?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think any other founders listening, figure out what your biggest USP is. For us, it's the ease of use. The simplicity of the product is our biggest USP, and just make sure that firstly, that is valid and that, it's the right USP, but then double down on it, just make sure that never gets lost as you build the product out. And secondly, when you talk about, competing with the banks and that kind of stuff, again, talking to the monetization point, I think don't try and compete on price. Because you'll probably lose. They've got the big budgets. If the people like the product that you have, they'll pay for it. So don't try and be cheap, because it goes to the point of what you need to have a sustainable business. But yeah, if people really like using your product, they'll pay up for it.
Amazing. Gents, I think in the limited time we have left, I'd love to just find out a bit more about where Franc goes from here. What does this journey look like? You've done some interesting stuff in even the Bitcoin space I've seen recently launched, and maybe talk to us about what can we expect to see from Team Franc in the next 18 months. What's high on the agenda, how you're applying all of this learnings absorbed now into being a more effective, racing to break even and then profitability business. Some insights from both of you, please. Again, you wear different hats, so curious to hear from both of those.
So let me start. Yeah, I think in one sense, people can invest in a discretionary capacity and people can invest in a tax benefit. So it's a key drive of us now. We've talked about expanding the shopfront. We started off kind of very specifically, very simply, and I think we want to keep that simplicity, but there are also things that people can and should be doing. Tax-free savings account, it's a great opportunity and resource for people to do, especially for their children, So let's expand that out so that we can serve very comprehensively an individual's kind of investment needs. And then I think the other there are other target market segments we've identified in the B2C space who really, really likes the simplicity. And that's definitely a wedge for us to drive and it's a big wedge, which is great. But there also now are other kind of people that have investment needs, whether that's businesses wanting to help their employees save for retirement, or young company owners, like you're a sole proprietor or you're like a freelancer. You need to manage your cash flow, to be able to afford your provisional tax payment, twice a year, et cetera, et cetera. Like there are other niche opportunities where we can deploy what we've already built, targeting a different pain point.
Interesting. Seb, from your side?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of longer term vision of ours is always to be kind of like a one-stop financial services shop, right? And I think investments was the first kind of like beachhead into it. But for someone that doesn't want to go to 10, different service providers, over time, we want them to be able to buy a life insurance policy, buy a funeral policy, maybe insure their car, whatever it is, any financial services pain point that they have, I think we want to be able to solve. Obviously, yeah, we'll focus on investments probably for the next couple of years, but yeah, longer term, that's kind of what we want to do. Just to add on to the products that I mentioned again, we've got a lot of feedback that people just want a pure savings account. That is also probably something that we'll launch very soon. Just to have the ability to earn some interest on your money with close to instant access. I think that's we've done a lot of research looking at other product providers, and those have been big hits.
I mean, how exciting, right? And certainly if I look at the two of you and hear some of the context here, it's like, is there a better team position to do this? I'm not sure, which is pretty cool.
Tell that to the investors and to give
there we go. Well, any investors listening in here today, there's no team better to do this than the Franc team. I've quite enjoyed. I know we were speaking offline before we started recording today that the two of you remain friends, and doing business with your friends is not always easy. But there still seems to be a healthy dynamic there.
I think we're also quite different,
Sure,
so as you
sure.
have picked up, like Tom talked about risk taking. He often talks about he's the kite, I'm the guy, pulling him back down. Yeah. So, and I think you need that in a founder relationship. You can't have two guys who are gung ho, and you can't have people that are too conservative, right? You need to have that kind of that kind of dynamic.
Do you, Tom? You wanted to say something?
No, and I think I completely agree. But there's also trust, right? Which I think is fundamental, because in that relationship, you've got to be trusting and flexible to be able to kind of like trust that you're trusting the other party is saying something because it's meaningful and needs to be said, not that they're doing it because they want to spite you or undercut you or like undermine you. That's like not even on. You can have a frank discussion, no pun intended, around the issue at hand, and then flexible enough to be able to change your mind, roll with it. Like, okay, I can see why this is a little bit too risky. No, not a great idea. Let's rather focus on this because this is more important, et cetera, et cetera. Because I think and unfortunately, some people think that like, being overconfident and being stubborn-headed is like a hallmark of an entrepreneur. Like, yes, to some degree, but the moment you take it internal within a team, like that can also be poisonous. It can damage a team, it can damage relationships, and co-founders break up like all the time. It's a real phenomena. So yeah, I think if you want to build a lasting kind of like team, a lasting relationship, you need to be flexible and maintain that trust.
Quick one-word answer. Do you think you could have done this without your co-founder?
Don't think so, no.
There we go. Answers the question. Gents, the final thing that we'd just like to ask our guests, and this is maybe taking off the founder hat for a second and just looking at you as Tom and Seb. We'd like to ask guests, what does actually all of this mean at the end of the day? So you're going to be 70-year-old men one day sitting on some stoop, and it either worked or it didn't work. And the question is, what does success look like for you? Is it selling this business for many millions, tens, hundreds? Is it legacy? Is it leaving an impact in the world? It could be a combination of all three, or none of the above. Maybe just let's end on that note. Well, what does this all mean success-wise for you guys? Seb, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's not the money. I mean, that would be a nice cherry on top. But yeah, that's not it for me. I think it's just if someone can tell me, hey, you know, I used to use Franc, I loved it. You know, that's kind of, and I learned a lot. You know, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to help people be better with their money, help them to build their wealth. And we've done that for thousands of people. So, you know, the kind of like the tick is already there. It's just now how can we help, you know, hundreds of thousands of people achieve the same thing.
Right.
How big the tick is.
Yeah.
Yes. Tom, what about you?
Definitely agree on that point. Again, money would be a cherry, but the primary thing is actually solving a meaningful problem. You know, like I mentioned earlier, like I think this is a meaningful problem and it's got real impact in South Africa. And I think nobody can live in South Africa and not be aware of the wealth and income inequality that exists. And trying to resolve that, I think can lead and hopefully will lead to broader happiness just on a societal level. And that's definitely a driver for me. So wanting to solve the problem, I suppose, and the problem still persists and therefore can do it. There are two other dimensions which fold in for me. The one is learning. I love learning and I'm continue to learn on a daily basis. And I like, you know, new challenges, new opportunities. And so I think, you know, that's my personal litmus test, you know, like keep that learning high and don't be afraid to go into something that's, you know, new that I don't understand. And then the last, but it is very honest, I became a dad. You know, my youngest now is 6 months old, you know, in a couple of days. And my oldest is like 2.5. And having the freedom to be a very present father because I could manage my time and be available is like gold dust at this part of my life. So yeah, I will have no regrets. I think looking back as a man and, you know, in my 70s on the stoop, you know, meaningful problem, available as a father at a very critical stage in life, and like learned a hell of a lot, you know. So regardless of what, you know, if we have the cherry without the cherry, like I don't think it'll change my positive reflection on this time in my life.
Amazing. I think just such a great way to conclude our conversation today. A big, bold problem being solved by a great team in an interesting way. And I think on behalf of all the listeners, we're really excited to see what happens next in the Franc journey. For those of you listening, this is Thomas Brennan and Seb Patel, co-founders of Franc. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having us, man.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. That was Thomas Brennan and Seb Patel, co-founders of Franc. I'm Matthew Marsden, and if you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to subscribe and follow us on our socials. Share this with your network as well. We look forward to seeing you next time.